Well, now the House has passed the most sweeping healthcare legislation in 4 decades. It's time to take a look at its impact on the economy. Now, Bloomberg Best means we bring you only the best people on the economy. So we've crunched numbers to find the most accurate forecasters in the world. Well, joining us is one of them, Brian Wesbury, chief economist at First Trust Advisors, who is one of Bloomberg's best. Brian, welcome to you. What do you think of the healthcare overhaul and what it means for the U.S. economy? Do you think it will ultimately be stimulative or not?
Yeah, I don't think it will be stimulative. I think in the long run, the more you try to take the risk out of an economy, in this case, the risk out of something going wrong with your health, the slower, the less dynamic an economy is. I mean, I think you just have to look at continental Europe, Germany, France, Spain, Italy. They've had 7, 8, 9, 10% unemployment rates now for 30 or 40 years, and I think it's because of the size of their government. So over the long run, I think this will sap some dynamism from the U.S. economy.
But what about the deficit? The CBO, as you probably know, says healthcare reform will reduce the deficit by $143 billion in 10 years.
Right.
Is that a meaningful improvement?
Yeah, I don't think so. And, the CBO, look, they do the best they can. It's a very complicated bill. It's a very complicated economy. But typically, tax hikes do not bring in the revenue that people think they will. And government spending tends to be greater, especially in something like this. It happened with Medicare and Medicaid. They're much larger than the original estimates ever thought they would be. So in the end, I think if you look at the next 10 and 20 years, I think this will add significantly to the size of the government and the deficit, probably.
And Peter Bukvar of Miller Tabak is talking about an even smaller, to your point, a smaller private sector. I believe we have a graphic of his full quote here. One reality of our soon-to-be new system is the inevitable further rise in government spending that's headed to 25% of U.S. GDP from its long-term average of 20%. In order to finance this, there will be a smaller private sector and slower economic growth. So this sounds, he's very pessimistic. Are you that pessimistic?
Well, I don't, this is the interesting thing. I think this is true in the long run. But remember, the tax hikes that pay for this, the Cadillac tax hike, the tax on investments, all of the tax hikes really don't start until 2013. So I don't think we will see any change in the near-term economic outlook over this. Over the next 12 to 24 months, I still believe we're in a V-shaped economic recovery. I think we're going to have much better economic news. By the way, any conservative out there who is, or Republican who is arguing against this bill, saying it's going to kill the economy right away, they're going to look wrong. And that's going to change the dynamics of this political debate over the next few years.
Is it telling to you, or perhaps a disconnect that we've seen now for a year, that U.S. stock markets today are rallying in the wake of this bill passage?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it's kind of the certainty that this has happened now. Whether or not you believe it's good news or bad news, we now know what's passed. There are going to be some changes to the law, but it's pretty clear that we don't get tax hikes till 2013, almost no matter what happens in this. And therefore, I think the market's up because of that. The other thing that I think the market is looking at is that there's going to be a real powerful resurgence of conservative activism. Now, we won't know how that plays out until November of this year, but there could be a major change in Congress. And if that works out, then in fact what we're looking at is the potential for much better legislation, even a repeal of this law sometime over the next 2 to 4 years.
Does any of this, with your outlook of a V-shaped economy, bode well for the jobs picture? The March jobs report is in 2 weeks.
Sure. Yeah, we are predicting a 300,000 job gain in March. It could even be bigger than that, given the census hiring sort of been a little bit delayed and slow, and the weather in February turned better in March. I think we're in a V-shaped recovery. The unemployment rate is going to come down into the 8s by the end of the year in our models, somewhere between 8.5% and 9%. All that means the economy is going to look really good. We are in a self-sustaining, self-reinforcing recovery right now, regardless of this health care bill.
300,000 jobs added. That sounds a bit outrageous, Brian.
Yeah.
Bloomberg survey is only calling for 5,000 payrolls to be.
Yeah.
Is it just the weather
I think-
discrepancy?
I'm not sure what it is. I think I look at it three different ways. Number one, we're in a recovery, and job growth is there. If you look at the household survey, we've gained jobs in the last 2 months. The second is the weather held us back in February. We'll get a boost from that in March as we make it up. The third is this census hiring, which isn't real hiring, but when in terms of the long-term economy. But the bottom line is those three things I think will lead to a really nice number for the month of March. It's going to feel very good.
Well, rosy outlook for the most part from you today, Brian. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Brian
Thank
Wesbury,
you.
appreciate it. Chief economist at First Trust Advisors, one of Bloomberg's best.